When I say I'm on a time crunch, I got like 30 minutes to make this video happen, so let's do it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Serious Science channel and welcome to a new video. So today we are doing yet another rant book discussion, but this time it's not a gush rant discussion, it's a rant discussion because I have a book here that has effectively wasted my time, and today I'm going to tell you why. So if you follow me on Twitter, this is no shock because I put a poll up to see if you guys would be interested in watching this video, and 15 of you guys said yes, so thank you for voting and I hope you're watching. Today we are talking about Caraval and why this book, this very popular YA book, has wasted my time. So you guys, I got so serious about what I wanted to talk about in this book rant discussion that I actually pulled out my reading journal and I made a page called Caraval Rant Discussion. And I've got 3 different points that I want to go over about Caraval in this video and tell you guys why I thought this book was so problematic. So I'm sure I don't need to explain the synopsis to you guys because this book is so popular, but for those people that have never heard of Caraval, it is a book about 2 sisters and their obsession with this annual game called Caraval. Now, Caraval travels every single year. It's never held in the same place twice, and it is ran by this ringleader called Legend. Nobody's ever seen Legend. There's just legends of Legend, and the girls are obsessed with him. 2 sisters of this book are Donatella and Scarlet. Scarlet is older, Donatella is younger. And we begin the book when Donatella is getting involved with this mysterious sailor named Julian. Ever since they were kids, Scarlet and Donatella have been writing to Legend begging him to come and host Caraval and on their island, but he has never replied. Until a couple days before Scarlet's arranged marriage, he finally sends a letter back and invites them both to Caraval. Alright, so the first thing that I wanted to talk about as to what I disliked about Caraval and my reading experience was seeing the world through Scarlet's eyes. Scarlet is our main character. We hear the whole story from her point of view, and honestly, I just was not a fan of her. So recently I just read a discussion done by Devour Books with Donna on her blog about if a main character makes or breaks a book. In my opinion, a main character can indeed make or break a book, and in this case, Scarlet definitely broke Caraval for me. The main point that I have written down here in my little reading journal notes is the fact that so much of her character was written in a way that she sounded like a Disney princess in distress. And some people may not see that as a bad thing, and that's not inherently a bad thing at all. But in my opinion, I just don't think that Caraval benefited from having her constantly be fluctuating in her emotions so heavily. I have a couple quotes that I want to read to you guys so that you can kind of see what I mean. This first quote needs some context. Basically, Scarlet is very concerned with making sure that this arranged marriage goes to plan because her dad is cruel and he will hurt her if she does not marry this count that she is supposed to marry. So when Legend writes to them and says that they are invited to Caraval, it's only a couple days away from her wedding, in between Caraval and her wedding, and she's like, there's no way that this is going to work. But Tella has thought otherwise. She's like, this is finally coming true. We have wanted this for forever. I'm going. And to convince her to go, Tella and Julian basically work together to drug and kidnap Scarlet and bring her to the island of Caraval. So Scarlet has been drugged and kidnapped, and she wakes up on the boat with Julian alone in the middle of the ocean, and this is her reaction to this whole scenario. So the first thing that she does is she wakes up and she asks how long has she been asleep, which is just not realistic for if you have been drugged and kidnapped. The first thing you're really going to do is panic, right? But no, she asks how long she's been asleep. And I can picture this as a Disney princess thing to say, but even past that, here's the first thing she does with Julian. So first of all, she notices that he has more hair on his chin, he has stubble, and then she freaks out, her eyes go wide, and she says, "You blackguard," and she slaps him in the face. And a second later, she says, horror-filled Scarlet at what she's done. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. So let's just take a moment to think about that, shall we? You have been drugged and kidnapped by this guy that you have no idea what he's about. You have no idea who he is. All you know is that your sister has been messing with him, right? You wake up in a boat with him. The first thing you do is say, how long have I been out? And then you notice that he has stubble. And then you're like, oh my God, and you slap him. But then you apologize for it. It just screamed like a Disney princess reaction to me. There are even more instances throughout this book where Scarlet proves to just have this like wild pendulum of emotions that she swings throughout the entire book. And even Julian calls her out a couple times on being so dramatic. So for context, Julian and Scarlett have pretended to be engaged so that they could get into Caraval because legend has addressed Scarlett's ticket to Scarlett and her fiance, although we don't know who her fiance truly is. So they pretend to be engaged. So you need to go along with this plan so to make sure that there's nothing suspicious, right? No. Scarlett is so horrified by just the thought of being in the same bed as Julian, even though nobody has said that they had to sleep together. She just has these wild reactions to like really minuscule things in the grand scheme of my sister has gone missing, I'm on this strange island with this strange guy. So here's another instance where I thought that Scarlett was being extremely dramatic. She says, "This isn't funny. We can't sleep in here together. If anyone finds out, I'll be utterly ruined." And Julian literally says, "There you go, being dramatic again. You think everything is going to destroy your life." And really, that's basically Scarlett summed up in a nutshell. She just thinks that everything's going to ruin her life. In another instance on the next page, Julian is like, "Yeah, whatever, you bat. I'm going to lay here because this is a bed that's meant for us and I need to sleep." So he starts taking off his shirt and she says, "What are you doing? You can't do that." And it's like, he's taking his shirt off. He's not trying to have sex with you. Like, calm down. Like, there was literally an agreement between them that if they sleep in this bed, there will be no touching, no sexual, nothing. So why are you getting so over dramatic about him taking his shirt off? There were just little things like that that Scarlett continuously did over and over and over throughout the book that just made me roll my eyes at her character. But besides Scarlett, I want to talk about the writing style of Caraval because a lot of this book, a lot of the quotable moments of this book felt so forced to me. So one of the most popular quotes of Caraval is this section here on page 106, where Scarlett is looking at Julian and just talking and just thinking about him. She says, she remembered her first impression of him. Tall, roughly handsome, and dangerous, like poison dressed up in an attractive bottle. It's not cute. It's supposed to be a quotable moment, but to me I was like, okay, literally nobody looks at this guy and says, "Wow, you look like an attractive bottle of poison." Who thinks like that? Come on. Another thing that really irritated me about Scarlett and the way that she has this relationship with Julian is the fact that she constantly refers to him as the blank sailor. So I have a couple written down here. She refers to him as the devious sailor, the simple sailor, the mysterious sailor, and it's like, annoying. Like, why just call him by his name? It reminded me of Raid with Sarah here on BookTube's discussion about Eleanor and Park, in that Eleanor always refers to Park as the blank Asian kid, which in that case is different because Sarah brings us up to point out that there is a lot of underlying racism in Eleanor and Park, and that is not the same reason that Scarlett is constantly referring to Julian as the blank sailor, but I just drew that comparison because it feels like there's no characterization going into Julian from Scarlett's point of view. And that unsatisfactory characterization of Julian feeds right into my next point, which is the main event of today's video, and that is that Caraval has a lot of unsatisfactory persons of color representation. So let's talk about this, shall we? Did I purposefully put on my melanin t-shirt for this discussion? Yes, in fact I did. So I want to preference this part of the discussion by saying that there might be some people out there that do not think that this is a big deal. And that's okay. You know, some people, you don't have to fight every battle. This is not me saying to boycott Stephanie Garber. This is not me saying cancel Stephanie Garber for person of color representation. It's just that I want to call attention to this because I believe that we can do better. So within Caraval, there are two people of color. One is a main character and one is a side character that doesn't even get a name, which is okay. But Julian is the main character who is also a person of color. We're going to talk about him last because I think that he is most important, but let's talk about this unnamed black character. So this unnamed black character is a woman who works as the greeter of people that are entering Caraval. And basically, the only thing that we get for this character is the fact that she says, "Welcome." And it says that a dark-skinned girl on a unicycle pedaled out from behind the banner, cutting Scarlett off. "You're here just in time." A little later, Scarlett and Julian run into the same girl again, and the girl greets them, and she says, "Oh, if it isn't the happy couple." And Scarlett observes that the pretty dark-skinned girl clapped excitedly as they jumped into her boat. So I just want to talk about this character for a second, and actually I want to correct myself. She was not unnamed, her name is Jovan. Okay, so I'm gonna get to my point in a second, but I also want to talk about Julian, who also happens to be a person of color in this book. Julian also happens to be a main character of this book. And despite the fact that Julian is a main character and plays a paramount role to the plot of Caraval, the only description that we get for Julian that denotes that he is a person of color is the fact that he has a row of, quote, golden brown muscles. Now, to be fair, we do get a little bit more characterization of Julian on page 151 when Scarlett starts to describe him as his rugged face, his wild dark hair, his warm brown skin. And that is page 151, and you want to know what 151 of this book constitutes? It constitutes nearly 40% through the book before we get he has warm brown skin. Julian is first described by his muscles rather than anything to do with the fact that he is a person of color. That is the only description that we get of Julian for 40% of the book that describes him as a person of color. Now, there could be some criticism here. There could be people saying, okay, so you're a big deal, right? It's not a big deal, which it wouldn't be, right? I might have been able to turn a blind eye to this, and I might have been able to been like, okay, it's not a big deal, I'm not going to talk about it, if for the fact there was not a huge discrepancy between the characterization and description given to our white characters and our people of color in this book. So on page 67 of Caraval, we get this long paragraph of beautiful description of Scarlett and Tella. Here's what it says. Scarlett was a pretty girl, though she often liked to hide it. She inherited her mother's thick, dark hair, which complemented her olive skin. Her face was more of an oval than Tella's, with a petite nose and Hazel's eyes so large she always felt they gave away too much. Along with this, Scarlett constantly refers to her little sister Tella by her golden honey blonde hair. So this really rubbed me the wrong way as a black reader, because the people of color in Caraval got the description of pretty dark-skinned girl, right, for Jovan. And for Julian, who is a main character of the book, we only know that he is a person of color because he is described by his golden brown muscles until 50%, 40% of the book where we get he has warm brown skin. That's it. That's all the people of color get in Caraval. But we get honey blonde hair, we get olive skin, we get petite nose, we get oval face for Scarlett and Tella. The characterization of our white characters and the characterization and description of our black characters is like non-existent. The gap is so big, and that just really bugged me. I don't mean to get controversial in this video, but I do want to talk about it because it made me, as a black woman reading this book, feel unimportant. It felt like people that looked like me, the characterization and description of people that looked like me in this book was not as important as the characterization and description of our white characters. And that's just not fair, because I can count on my hand how many books I've read or even heard about with characters that look like me, with this dark skin. Some people might think of this and look at this book, look at Caraval in this instance as one isolated situation, right? Like, oh, it's just this book. But when you zoom out, you forget to look that almost every book that I have read has a white character, a white main character. And when the people of color come into the book, it's like we are side characters that don't get names, or we don't get characterization, or we don't get description, or the description is very belittling, right? You know, some people might counteract this argument by saying, well, Jovan, the pretty dark-skinned black girl, she didn't play like a good big role, like there was no real importance to her character, right? Which is true, but you know who was important to the book and still got very, very minimal characterization and description of being a person of color? Julian. I think it's so important to talk about these things and call it out and don't pretend like they don't exist, because that's the only way that we see change. And this year I have been so thrilled to see more black girls on the cover. Daughter of Nari came out this month. We had War Girls come out this year. We had The Stars and the Blackness Between Them come out this year. There's just so much more black girls, dark-skinned black girls at that, on covers now. And I do wholeheartedly believe that that is possible because more people have stepped up and said, hey, we need more representation in this community. Authors, you have a job to do. If you can write a world about a magical carnival that goes to every single place, never goes to the same place twice, has this ringleader that nobody sees, and has all these magical elements happening, you can characterize a Black person. You can give them adequate description. It's really not as hard as creating a whole fantasy world. And my sole goal with talking about this and bringing it up and bringing it to everybody's attention is to make sure that it's not a preposterous thing to ask an author to characterize their Black or Asian or Native American or anything else characters. It's not preposterous, it's not impossible, and the more we talk about it, the more we encourage it, the more that we say, hey, this needs to happen, the more it will happen. All right, I am way past my allotted time that I had to make this video happen, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up there for this week's video. I hope that you guys enjoyed this rant discussion, and I hope that you guys took something away from it, if not hearing from my own experience as a Black reader reading this book and the issues with person of color representation. I really hope that this encourages you to look for these things in books and call it out yourself. And again, this is not me saying don't read this book. I'm still going to read Legendary, and I'm still going to read Finale just because I own Legendary, and then if I read Legendary, I have to read Finale. So I'm going to continue the series, and I hope that it just improves. So if you still want to read Caraval, go ahead, read it. That doesn't mean you're a bad person. I'm not going to like bag on you for reading it. I'm still going to read it, but I just wanted to talk about it today and hope that things change. Thank you guys so much for watching this week's video. If you liked it, subscribe, and I will see you guys next Sunday. Bye!